So I'll set the scene to start. We've just made our way into the arena in the centre of Birmingham. In fact, the last time we were here was Ricky Gervais.
For your 30th. Came to see Ricky Gervais here, didn't we?
And it's really nice. It's a really beautiful, sunny winter's day here in Birmingham. There's loads of hustle and bustle going on in the main arena as everyone sets up. And actually, when you walk into that place without a crowd in it, you realise just how vast it is and what an incredible effort it is to be able to play a place like this and the demands that you have. And very kindly, Frank Turner, ahead of his busy day, has come back, and we're in a fancy dressing room. And
well, it wasn't fancy until we turned the lights around the mirror on, like we're in a movie.
The mirror lights have made it fancier, certainly. I mean, I sort of hesitate to describe this sterile room as fancy, but it is certainly a lot nicer than some dressing rooms I've been in my time.
So last night you played Manchester.
Well, no, we were just rehearsing the last couple of days in Manchester. Because there was a space that was the right size to do it in, but today is the first day of the tour.
Wow. And the rehearsal space, what is that?
It was actually the venue that we're playing in Manchester on Friday. So, but it would have been better for us simpler for us to rehearse here, but it turned out that hiring the arena for 2 extra days was going to bankrupt the tour. So we didn't do that.
What are the sort of anxiety levels the night before the first gig versus halfway through the tour?
Well, a little more, but not enormously more, because it's counterbalanced by excitement. I don't want to say that I never want to say that I'm kind of jaded by any aspect of what I do, but this is my job. Do you know what I mean? And it does get, once you're in the middle of a tour, it's a daily routine. One aspect of that's very satisfying. Do you know what I mean? To just get up and do the thing you do every day. But today I'm really excited because, I mean, partly, the tours we do in the UK are the biggest tours that we do. So we have the biggest crew, we have the biggest production, and we've got the core crew, which has been the same since time immemorial. But it's nice that, like, in terms of the extra crew that we get on this, there's a lot of the people who are our kind of B team for crew come in.
Yeah.
So it's like the whole extended family together. Do you know what I mean? Like Jamie's here and Connor's here and all these people that we only see occasionally, usually. So pretty much everyone knows everybody, which is lovely. And it's exciting. I mean, in a funny way, on a tour on this level, I actually sort of have less to do because there's so many crew running around. There's so much kind of production going on that all I really have to do is pick up guitar and play. Do you know what I mean? I'm not restringing guitars right now.
It looks so easy to an audience member who just turns up and loves it and sings along.
Yeah.
But I suppose actually that is quite an intense process, not just the gigs, setting up, making sure it goes well, but then spending day in, day out with these people. Like we joke about it in the office, don't we? When we share the same bit of carpet, but it's the same for you just on a bus,
definitely,
right?
Or arguably more so, just in the sense that we sleep within feet of each other. Do you know what I mean? And it's like, it's a very the thing is though, like, particularly, like I say, core crew is like me, the band, and then like tour manager, production manager, merch, guitar tech, and lights. Like we are a group that we go everywhere together. That's the minimum crew, and like we've been through enough together that actually, because this is the other thing. Like, I mean, I'm 37 and I'm pretty much the youngest guy, and certainly the youngest guy in the band, and I'm one of the youngest in the crew, and like, we've all been doing this for long enough. Like, we've been through those tours where everyone was trying to murder each other, and and we've sort of, obviously we have up and down days, but like everyone's just sort of accepted this is what we do now in a really good way, and also it's the first day of tour, so everyone's excited to be here. Of course,
yeah.
So when you got the bus over here through the night last night, who would be on that bus? How many?
Well, we've got 2 buses on this tour because we've got enough people for 2 buses, which makes me feel very established. I mean, the thing is, you only ever really sleep on a bus, so the fantasies I had as a kid of sort of racing 2 buses down the motorway and trying to sort of board each other with gangplanks doesn't happen. It'd be terribly dangerous. But we have. I think we've got 12 people on our bus, and there's about 14 on the crew bus, I think.
So realistically, though, I mean, it sounds glamorous having your own tour bus, but do you get a good night's sleep on that?
You know what? I actually didn't particularly last night, just because I haven't been in a bus for about a month or so, and it always takes a night or 2 to tune in. Once you get used to sleeping on a bus, you sleep better on a bus than anywhere else, or at least I do.
Really?
You know, when you have a small baby,
I know what you're going to say.
Yeah, you drive them around the car or whatever to kind of get them to go to sleep, the rocking motion of the car. When you're in a tour bus bunk, it is pitch black. You've got your own space, you've got your curtains drawn, you've got earplugs in, and it's like it's sleeping in the grave kind of thing. Do you know what I mean? It's just you're just out. I woke up in the night and just thought to myself, I felt quite refreshed and thought, my alarm hasn't gone off yet, so it's before 9, but it might be 8. Do you know what I mean? And that's a good night's sleep. I feel pretty good. I can get up a bit early, have an extra hour in my day. I looked at my watch; it was 3 a.m.
No way.
And there's just no way of telling because it's pitch black. So that was a bit galling.
Well, actually,
last night.
I remember when we saw Ricky Gervais here, and funnily enough, he told the story of how he gets on his first private jet and he's so embarrassed because he's walking past people that are going on a normal flight and he feels really humble, and then the second time it comes around he's like, where's that bloody jet?
Totally.
Is it the same with the tour bus? Day one it's like, oh my god, I've got a tour bus. Day two it's like, oh bloody hell, these bunk beds are a nightmare.
It's funny, I've lived on tour buses more than anywhere else in the last 15 years of my life, but I did enough kind of train, car and van touring that there's still a part of me that's a bit excited about having a bus.
Yeah, it should be.
Yeah. It's not. I'm not going to sit in the back of a van on an amp and sleep on the floor. It's been a long time since I did that, but that was a very formative period in my life. Yeah. So at the very least, I don't complain about buses, should we say. But I mean, we're also helped by the fact my bass player Tarrant runs Vans for Bands, which is the company that we hire our buses off. So we tend to get the nice bus.
Brilliant.
Do you know what I mean? Because
what does that mean? Is there gimmicks on there?
Well, no, it just means the plug sockets work.
Yeah, sure.
We've got memory foam mattresses this time around. That's a new development in our lives.
Love it. Now, how much of the year would be on tour and how much would be at home?
Well, it differs from year to year. Do you know what I mean? It depends. Like last year got very hectic from about March onwards because we had a new album coming out in May and that engenders its own schedule. Do you know what I mean? This year we've got this tour. We're then not really doing anything till April, collectively touring wise. I mean, I'm busy doing other things. And then we're going to have a really busy festival summer. And then probably some shows at the end of the year where I've actually got a meeting later today to discuss the second half of this year. So it does depend. The thing that has changed in the sort of earlier years of my solo career, first on my own and then once the Sleeping Souls became an entity and I had the sort of wherewithal to tour with the band, we used to tour like maniacs. I think the longest I went without going home was 13 months.
Wow.
And we do 20 plus shows in a row without a day off and all this kind of thing. And, partly that was just because we were sort of young, to be blunt. I mean, we were in our 20s and we were fired with evangelist passion. And I couldn't do that now.
Do you need routine now?
Yeah, I mean, well, I don't know. It's kind of, there are aspects of touring that are less exciting than it was in the really hand-to-mouth early days. There aren't so many days where I just go, fuck it, and get on a plane to Latvia and go and play in a squat. Yeah. Do you know what I mean? It's because there's more to get done and there's more people involved, both in front of and behind the stage. There's a lot more regimentation to it. Do you know what I mean?
Sure.
It's funny. There's a weird bit of authority structuring. I am technically the boss, right? In terms of the run up to the tour. The minute the tour starts, I am not
You're
a
a backseat driver.
Good Lord. I am under orders from my tour manager and I do what she tells me to do. And if I misbehave or am I not in the right place, I get told off.
So even those spontaneous gigs where you just fly somewhere and just perform wherever, does that impact the feeling that you get on stage compared to a regimented tour that's structured and you know what to expect?
I think there's a lot more professional satisfaction, shall we say, at this level in a way. Yeah. It's less kind of like romantic in some ways.
Yeah, that's it. Yeah.
Yeah, but at the same time, I mean, I'm from a thoroughly middle class background. There is no part of me that could be described as blue collar in terms of how I grew up. And I think that I'm old enough and secure enough in myself now to recognise that part of what I enjoy about being a touring person is that it's a sense of working hard with a complicated operation, and everyone knows their job, and we all do it well, and we work hard, and no one fucks around. And I like, there's a sense of satisfaction of walking off stage and just going, yeah, you know what, we did a good thing today that is hard to do.
Yeah, that's interesting cool. Actually, because did that take some time for you to? There is a juxtaposition there with Frank Turner.
Yeah.
Of, there was punk and extremely liberal, and you're out on tour and you're covered in tattoos, and a contrast against the. did that take some time for you to be like, no, that is my path? And that,
yeah, to a degree. I mean, the thing that I would say is that the element of punk that I was particularly attracted to was particularly the hardcore idea, which is very sort of Protestant in its way. Do you know what I mean? If you look at, because I was obsessed with Black Flag as a kid, I still am, and they went out and they toured their asses off, and there was Minor Threat and the whole straight edge vibe and all that kind of thing. I'm not straight edge these days, I was when I was a kid, but it's about putting your head down and doing the work, and I was always attracted to that. Part of that came from when I was a kid. I remember being part of the London hardcore scene in the late 90s. We had our bands, and I was in one or two of them, and we were all right. And then these American bands would come through and would just annihilate us. Really? And the reason is that they'd done 300 shows that year, and a London hardcore band in the 90s could do 50 if you at a push, because there just wasn't enough people.
Wasn't a big enough scene.
Yeah, to do it. And I just remember seeing, Walls of Jericho come through and just devastate us from a musical point of view, and it was because they toured so much. And even back then, I remember taking mental notes and being like, I want to be someone who does that many shows.
Yeah, I was going to ask, was it a kick in the balls to see that, or was it inspiring?
It was inspiring. Yeah. It was inspiring. But I mean, it definitely made me feel, and I don't want to do down anyone who's part of that scene, but it made me feel like we were kind of out.
It humbled you.
Yeah. And it was just like, but then the thing is, it was so hard back then to do anything more than 50 shows a year in a hardcore band based in the UK. Because you're never going to make enough money out of it to make a full-time living. And you could tour in Europe more, I suppose, but you just couldn't do that level of touring. So yeah, I used to just really kind of idolise those bands.
How old were you then? And did you look back fondly of that time now?
Yeah, there's a question. I started going to hardcore shows when I was about 15. I did my first tour in the summer of '98 when I was 16, which I'm quite proud of, because we were very punk in the sense that, like, me and two friends, we had this band called Knee Jerk, and we were like, what do punk bands do? They tour. How does a band tour? You just book it, because we're all DIY and we're punk, and punk's about just seizing the day and all the rest of it. Yeah. Maximum Rock and Roll, the American zine, used to have a page called BYOL, which stood for Book Your Own Life, that had a list of American national sort of local promoters for the whole country. And Fracture zine, which was a UK hardcore zine out of Cardiff, used to do the same thing. So we just got an issue of Fracture that on the back page had a list of, if you want a gig in Nottingham, call this guy. And this is pre-mobile phones as well, so you're literally just going to a payphone and calling like a landline.
Wow.
And asking for like someone who's usually called something like Stig. Do you know what I mean? And we managed to book a 2-week tour in the summer of '98, and we were 16, and we had to find someone who was old enough to drive a van.
That's mad.
And no one came to any of the shows. I mean, that's not strictly true. There were a few, but it was pretty dire, the tour. But we loved it. But yeah, that scene. Looking back fondly, I mean, that scene, Million Dead, Knee Jerk broke up. Million Dead started out, and we did a few shows on that scene. But once Million Dead started getting a bit more successful in the more kind of like 100 Reasons, kind of Kerrang magazine, early 2000s kind of vibe, there was a moment in time where some people from that scene decided that we were no longer accepted.
Really?
Do you know what I mean? Because
Why?
because we weren't militantly DIY anymore. I mean, it's a funny, the term DIY is a loaded one, and I still, in some levels, and I'm partly being deliberately provocative in saying this, I still regard part of what I do as being DIY, in the sense that the DIY ethos to me just means just not waiting for somebody else to do it for you. Do you know what I mean? Just like, and these days I don't book my own shows, obviously. I don't drive the fucking tour bus. Because somebody else is doing that, that gives me time to write a book, or do 2 side projects, or write a journalistic blog on Sierra Leone, or whatever it is. It's just the attitude of seizing the moment and being proactive. But yeah, so I mean, with Million Dead, we got a manager, and we signed a record deal. And as far as the militant DIY scene is concerned, that's not cool.
But surely that is to do with the larger you get, the larger the fan base you have, and the more responsibility you have to be able to deliver.
Yeah, sure. But the Anarchist, the kind of like Catharsis was the band that's sort of like crime think, freegan kind of scene. Like it's supposed to be, it's militantly anarchist in a way that I actually think is kind of at the very least intellectually coherent. Do you know what I mean? It's like their set of values make sense, but it is also extremely self-limiting necessarily. And for me, art's about communication. Do you know what I mean? And I wanted to communicate with more people, and that necessarily entailed moving beyond the confines of that scene.
Yeah. Well, around about that time, so you said you were like, what, 15, 16?
16 on my first tour, yeah.
So what was the, at school, family, what was everyone's impression of that? And were they just like, yeah, go for it? Or what was the sort of...
Well, okay, so we tour and do shows in the school holidays, because I was still at school. I hated my secondary school. As you probably know, I got a scholarship to Eton College when I was a kid, and I appreciate the education I received there because it was world class, which is why it's expensive if you pay. I didn't on a scholarship there, but this social milieu there was extremely distasteful to me. And it's a funny thing because it's like I find it difficult to blame that on 13 to 18-year-old kids because at that age you are a child. But then the thing is, it's like you meet their parents and they're just sort of scaled up versions of them, and the question becomes when and where do you place responsibility for the shape of somebody's life? But anyway, so I sort of militantly didn't like anyone at school and they didn't like me, and that was fine. So I didn't really give a fuck about what anyone felt on that level. My parents were extremely against it, and there was a real moment with them when Million Dead broke up. I think my mum kind of went, phew, he's going to stop doing this music bollocks now and he's going to go and get a job. And I didn't. I started playing solo shows with a guitar to less people, and then taking the train around. And I think my mum was really mortified at that point. Wow. She's into it now. She's coming to Ali Pally.
I love that.
Do you think it could have happened, though, without that?
There's certainly...
Because I wonder if you went to middle of the road school, you're a very, very bright guy, clearly, succeeded, was very accepted, whether you would have felt such a...
Yeah, that's an interesting counterfactual, and it's quite sort of I feel like I'm on the couch now, but which is fine. But I mean, there was definitely my embrace of punk rock as a concept was fueled by an extreme sense of dislocation. Do you know what I mean? I just because I went to state schools before I went to Eton College, and then suddenly, but it wasn't really explained to me what was going on when I took the scholarship exam. It was just like my parents were like, right, do that, and I was like, okay, and then suddenly I was at boarding school, and it was just like, what the fuck?
That is mental. That's rare, isn't it?
I was very quickly. And the thing is, I don't want to call everyone I went to school with a cunt. Do you know what I mean? It's like there were plenty of smart, intelligent, kind, nice people. But the general tone of it, I remember there was a term that was in currency when I arrived, which it took me a couple of weeks to figure out what they were referring to, but they used to use the word plebs to refer to people who didn't go to private school. And it took me, because I didn't know what that meant. And then when I figured it out, I was outraged. And there was a weird social divide between the scholarship kids, because the scholarship kids tended to be more socially diverse. Yeah. For obvious reasons, and I was just sickened by that at the time, and then I heard the Clash, and it was like we're gonna be fun, yeah. Do you know what I mean? And the Clash and the Pistols and Black Flag, and it was like, okay, this is my life raft, and certainly, my desire to run away and join the circus, shall we say, was fueled by having something to run away from. Mm-hmm. I mean, it's all terribly kind of comfortable and bourgeois. I'm not trying to sort of claim sort of Dickensian youth or anything. Do you know what I mean? But definitely who knows? Would I have been as involved in punk if I'd had a more comfortable, as in psychologically comfortable youth? I don't know.
But they always say it with amazing. I was listening to Mike Tyson the other day, and any great sports stars, there's generally a story of positive disadvantage, isn't it? It's not really. It's not really about what school it was. It was a massive cultural shock, and people walking around calling you a pleb. Sounds pretty miserable.
Yeah. I mean, I think there's an argument to be made that discomfort in your youth is not a bad thing in the long term. Do you know what I mean? Which is kind of an unfashionable thing to say.
No, I know.
I'm not a parent, so I'm probably going to change my mind on that at some point in my life. But certainly. I was very much driven by thinking that most of what I was surrounded with was bullshit when I was a kid, and it was like, you got to prove, and in some sort of slightly obvious ways, I still am. Do you know what I mean? Certainly my fiance points this out from time to time. She's just like, it's okay. You won. Let it go. Do you know what I mean? So I can see that.
So love that.
So now, when you're not touring, where do you?
I live in North London.
So what what is life now when you're not on tour? What are your routines?
I'm enjoying this conversation because we're going everywhere all the time. I was sort of vaguely getting to this at some point earlier, and we'll get back to it now. Part of the reason we tour less is because we're getting older. Part of the reason we tour less is that we now have 4 people in my central touring crew who have children. I'm engaged. I've got a cat. I know it's not the same thing, but it feels like it on time. Emotionally, I'm invested in my cat. So I think, and this is a slightly melodramatic way of saying this, but during my 20s and early 30s, I didn't have any reason to go home. Do you know what I mean? It was just, home was kind of, not only was home kind of, I wasn't getting anything done when I was at home, but also I had a tendency to get involved. I had something of a drug problem in my early 30s, which was basically I'd go home and just get wasted. And then when we started going home a bit more because other members of the band started having kids and getting older and stuff, I'd have more time at home, which meant I'd do more drugs. And it was a bad shout, and I'm very pleased, and it was a lot of work to get myself out from under that, and it's a wonderful new day. And as we were discussing just before we started recording, I've even quit smoking now, like, who have I become?
How many years sober now?
Oh, well, I'm not sober. I mean, I drink.
Yeah.
But I mean, last night I had, I think I had 2 glasses of wine, and then it was bedtime. Do you know what I mean? Yeah. The days of touring being a travelling stag do are behind us.
Yeah. Exactly.
Which I'm very pleased about.
And do you keep good company on tour? Are the people that are around you pretty?
Yeah, I mean, a tour on this level, it's pretty kind of self-contained. I work very hard to make sure that I make time for my friends in every city that we go to. So tonight we've got my buddy Tom, who used to book my early days, like super DIY bar shows, because I always try and stay in touch with that crew. Do you know what I mean? The people who let me sleep on their floor in the early days, they get guest lists. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah,
Fucking
I love
hell.
that.
And in fact, what particularly makes me, Tom's a guy who always goes, I don't want to, put you out and blah. And I'm just like, mate, come on, like fucking hell, you lost money on me at Scruffy Murphy's however many times. Yes, you're on the fucking guest list. And then my buddy Matt, I get tattooed in Birmingham generally because my buddy Matt runs Modern Body Art Tattoos.
Cool.
So he'll be down, but it is quite self-contained. It is possible on an arena tour to never see anything other than backstage and the gig. And I to try not to be quite so kind of alienated, but it can be hard.
Do you have certain things like every day that you try and because you are moving around so much, how do you find, like, what are your routines? There are certain things you like to do?
Well, I mean, I have a thing. I try and read. I'm an inveterate reader. I try and get through 50 pages of whatever I'm reading a day. If I read less than 50 pages a day, I feel like I've wasted my day. And then I've got a fair amount of work to do, whether it's kind of writing and tweaking set lists and lighting cues, doing press. Hello. And then I also a reasonable chunk of my day is still taking up the fact my email address is still on my website, and I which is obviously something I've borrowed from Henry Rollins. But when I was a kid, I emailed Henry Rollins and he emailed me back, and I'm still telling that story 17 years later. So it's a worthwhile use of my time, and I like that the way that being communicable like that sort of removes some of the mystique, as it were, or at least the sort of the social remove of what I do, because I'm still attracted to this idea that punk rock's about iconoclasm and that the people in bands aren't different from the people in the audience. That's a more difficult conceit to sustain when you're playing to thousands of people in an arena. But still, do you know what I mean? I don't want to be different from the people who come to the show.
Do you get, you were saying there about, like coming up in a middle class family and stuff like that. Now you're obviously doing arena tours, and you're saying there about that connection with the fans is so important. Do you have I remember you always saying to me that when your dad bought a BMW, he walked to school for...
He took my sister's Citroen.
Yeah, so he refused to turn up to work.
Yeah, he'd never had a nice car, and then he was on the verge of retirement, and then he got a BMW, but he couldn't turn up to school in it. So he took my sister's first car, which is a Citroen.
I know exactly what you mean.
Yeah.
That is, in my experience, a peculiarly British thing. One of the things I actually find quite refreshing about the States, and we spend a lot of time in America on tour. I mean, partly that's just simple geography. It's huge. You can tour it much more than you can in the UK without boring people. And we do well in the States these days, which is great. And I love America. I'm a gigantic America-phile, if that's the word I'm looking for. No one in America ever asks where you went to school, what your parents did for a living, or ever gives you shit for succeeding.
Well, they don't have the class system like we have.
Yeah, I mean, it's funny that you say that. They do have a class system which they're in denial about, but it's not the same. It's not the same as it is here.
Did you ever see that Grayson Perry documentary on class? It's amazing.
Grayson Perry, who tends to play my songs on the radio from time to time, which I'm extremely flattered by because I think he's a genius.
Yeah. He did a documentary on working middle and upper class, and really went into it, and it really was fascinating. But it's just amazing, like the wealthiest people. Like, it's such a British thing that the guys that own serious money are driving around in a Volvo with 250,000 miles on it and ripped trousers. Yeah. And at the other end of the spectrum, you've got people that have low income that are dressing themselves in gold. And there was three episodes, and it's fascinating.
Yeah,
to
totally.
watch.
I mean, there's definitely I tend to not talk about, like, you know, my mortgage and shit like that when I'm in this country. I have a mortgage. Yes, people who listen to the song Photosynthesis, I wrote it 12 years ago. Time changes.
But what about stuff like, I don't know, like cars, and do you indulge yourself, and would you ever feel guilty for that? I don't.
It's not that I feel guilty. I would be careful about my presentation of it, but then that's part of a wider thing, which is that a thing that I've learned over the years is how to protect a private part of my life, and that's not just to do with kind of being embarrassed about success. It's about that for me to psychologically survive, I need to have a corner of my life which is not on Twitter, on Facebook, or discussed in interviews. Do you know what I mean? I have and that's not to be kind of hostile in any way, but it's just, you know, I can't be Frank Turner in capital letters 24 hours a day, 365 days a year. I'd become a cartoon character. And in fact, there was possibly a moment in my life when that was starting to become the case, and I'm very pleased. You
start to believe it.
Well, just this goes back to what I was saying about not having reasons to go home. I didn't really have anything else going on in my life, and I actually feel like, even just as a songwriter, things have improved for me recently because I have a slightly more three-dimensional life. You know, there's only so many songs you can write about touring. Do you know what I mean?
Sure.
Before it gets a bit fucking tedious.
Yeah, definitely.
So, you know, I feel better that we take it a bit easier. And then going back to what you were asking earlier, like, I mean, when I'm at home, I'm a member of my local history society, and I try and I've got tons of other projects on the go. I try and keep myself busy. I do a lot of history walking. London history is my obsession outside of music. So, you know, I wander around and find kind of original Nash frontages and stuff like this.
Do you? That's so
look
cool.
At them and go.
So do you go on like walking tours?
Yeah, well, not really tours. I collect walking guides, and I've got quite a few of those now, and it's great. You know, the other day I did a run around trying to find graves of 17th century writers. So I was looking for Milton and people like that, and yeah, so it's fun. Do you know what I mean? I love that kind of thing. And where were we? I can't remember where we were. But yeah, I'm actually not a particularly materialistic person. My accountant, yes, I have an accountant. Obviously, I have an accountant. My accountant comments from time to time that I spend fuck all money, and in a slightly nervous way. Do you know what I mean?
What are you doing with it? What's it being saved for?
I mean, you mentioned cars. I actually only passed my driving test in July.
Did you?
Yes.
So talk me through that then. So
But I learned in Wood Green, which means that everywhere else is easy.
Right.
Yeah, I was in Sierra Leone a couple of weeks ago, and I was just like, this is nothing. Mate, so you try driving through Turnpike Lane at rush hour.
Love that.
But yeah, I mean, I'm still at that phase where driving is exciting. Do you know what I mean? So I
still find it exciting.
Yeah, but I'm like, does anyone need anything? Is there anything? I can just nip out. I could get
milk.
It.
Anyone milk?
Yeah. I just nip to IKEA. Buy a light bulb. Come back again.
I love that.
But yeah, so I'm excited about that. But yeah, so I haven't spent money on a car. I mean, it's funny. My production manager Dougie buys up kind of wrecks of classic cars and does them up. That's his hobby off tour, and is now his missus has essentially reached the point where she's like, you cannot buy any more fucking cars. Our driveway is full. So he's now, since I passed my test, trying to offload his kind of his potential purchases onto me. Yeah. He's just like, I found this car. It's really cool. You could buy it. But it's not of interest to me really.
You were saying earlier about it's like so important to keep like a section of your private life and stuff like that, and how I can't get my head around how, doing these interviews like you're doing now all the time. There have been certain points where you have been, I don't think it would be an understatement to say, betrayed by the press in some of the interviews. is there a sense of where you come into an interview and you always do have to have a certain guard because...
Yeah, I guess. I mean, but the thing about it is I've just been doing this for ages. Do you know what I mean? And it's become sort of second nature after a while. The times when I got burned in press stuff, and I'm hesitant to be too martyred about it. Do you know what I mean? It's like, it's part of the fucking game. If I spend my life running around trying to get in everyone's face and tell them who I am, to have some pushback on that at some level is kind of part of the course.
Part of the game, yeah, that makes sense. And does it feel like it is it's tomorrow's chip paper or whatever they say? Like, does it feel like after a few days that settles down and goes away?
That's actually a lot less true. One of the real issues these days, and this cuts through a lot of different things, is how deathless the internet is. Do you know what I mean? And that cuts on a lot of different... I had a message from somebody the other day pointing out lyrical discrepancies between songs I wrote when I was 19 and songs I wrote when I was 35, and going like, what was that about? And it's like, it's about 16 years of adult life. I mean,
sorry about that. I shouldn't have.
But and like there are things that, I mean, I've been documented running my mouth, which, as you can tell, I'm quite comfortable doing over a very long period of time. And of course, you could dig out inconsistencies of what I've said and things that I said when I was younger that I wouldn't say now or whatever. And I think that's true of every human in the world.
Definitely.
It just happens to be that it's easy to pick out my ones because you can fucking Google it and they're still there. And like, I specifically, one particular interview that I got completely banned about actually happened to be, part of the problem was it was an interview I did with a friend while we were drinking. And my phraseology was off, shall we say? and he very kindly offered to delete it from the internet immediately afterwards. And I said no, because I think that seems like unnecessary levels of self-censorship to me. But at the same time, it would be nice if people would, rather than just constantly reading an interview from 2008, would possibly read some of the things I said about it afterwards as well.
Exactly,
in the interim. And it's difficult to do that. I mean, it's like that's classic, it's a lie can travel all the way around the world in the time it takes the truth to get its boots on. Not I'm saying it's a lie necessarily, but you see those things like correction tweets get like 10% of the retweets that the bullshit one did and all the rest of it. It's difficult. It is. I mean, there's a great quote from Tom York who said, "You don't read press, you weigh it," which I quite like.
Yeah, that's
there is mileage in that, but I mean, I don't know. It's a necessary part of what I do.
And what is your relationship to social media now?
I'm doing, on a personal level, I'm doing my best to step away from it. I've got rid of my personal Facebook, which was a great joy, which I can't recommend highly enough. And I try not to spend too much time looking at Twitter and that kind of thing. But professionally, it's something I use a lot. I mean, it's a huge tool for what I do.
Great marketing tool.
So don't delete your personal Facebook. Keep using it. And make sure you click the subscribe button on my... but it's... I mean, it's a necessary tool. And it's funny because all that social media is actually is a tool. It's an accelerant. And it can be used for great evil or great good. Do you know what I mean? And I think that arguably we spend too much time talking about the negatives of social media, of which there are many. And I think it's done terrible things to our political discourse. And just the intellectual level of our political discourse has been confined to 140 characters. And there's a premium on outrage in the public forum these days, which is hugely unhelpful. Most specifically, people have confused anger and wisdom, which are, in point of fact, entirely separate things.
Definitely. We've all read texts and emails between colleagues and friends and taken it the wrong way because we can't tell the tone of their voice, let alone a stranger's tweet that we don't even know what they're on about. You
take the personal interaction. I think there's something very sort of evolutionary about the fact that when you sit in a room and talk to somebody, you're reading a lot of social cues off them. And when you're arguing with somebody on Twitter, you're not getting any of that. You're not even seeing a face. And in Exhibit A in my evidence to support my theory on this is Instagram, which is a much nicer social media forum because it's pictures.
Yeah.
Do you know what I mean? You see a person on Instagram, which means people aren't massive cunts in the comments in the way that they are on Twitter sometimes. But at the same time, I mean, for me, like, you can do fundraising on Twitter. I've done guerrilla kind of gigs, which is loads of fun. You just wake up in the morning and go, nice day to be in the north, and everyone goes, what the fuck? And then,
that's really cool to have that at your fingertips.
Yeah,
it's quite exciting.
You've got 500 people standing outside a bar.
That's amazing.
Awesome. Do you know what I mean? And like, there are positive angles to it. Do you know what I mean? That I think that we should focus on. You know, even like the ice bucket challenge. Incidentally, everyone who's down in the ice bucket challenge can go fuck themselves. Do you know what I mean? It's just like, if you're not into it, don't do it.
Sure.
Just do something else. Life is full of other things you could do.
Do you ever after the Birmingham gig, there'll be loads of people stood there enjoying, and then their favourite song will come on, and they'll get their phone out. And they'll film you, and they maybe wouldn't sing, or maybe they will sing along. But do you know what I mean? They're really into filming it.
Yeah.
Has the phone changed the atmosphere at your gigs?
A little, yeah. And I find it slightly saddening. I mean, I don't feel the need to be one of those bands who puts signs up around the gig. Do you know what I mean? At the end of the day, Todd Snyder, who's a folk singer, who I'm really into. You should check out his stuff if you don't know. He's incredible. He's got a very extreme line. Which isn't just about he's like, anyone can heckle me. It's like, you paid your money, you can do whatever the fuck you want. Do you know what I mean? You're the paying customer. If you want to call me a prick, fire away. Which I think is a bit extreme.
Yeah, sure.
But at the same time, like, you know, I'm not going to tell people not to get their phone out. I just think it's their loss. To be honest, it's just like this is a cliche to say, but it's like you're going to experience your entire life through a pixelated screen when it's literally happening in front of you. You know, just remember it.
I remember my cousin's kid, who was like 9 years old at the time, just a couple of years ago. We did something. I was playing football with him in the garden. An incredible goal went in, or something like that. And he was like, "Oh man, that was so live." And I looked at his mum and I was like, "What is that?" And she was like, "Oh, it's been because they saw it in real life." Yeah. So it's like because they're so used to seeing things on a screen.
That's staggeringly depressing.
It's unbelievable.
The one that I know that we're now straying into old men arguing in a pub.
We are, yeah. But like, I love it. Should we get a pint? Should we get a pint?
It's fine to do as long as we're self-aware, right?
Yeah, totally. Well, I have a friend who runs a thing called Old Man Club, where we meet up. Well, I don't go as often as the others because I'm on tour most of the time, but there's about 6 of us, and we meet up in a pub and just complain about the world.
Love
it's fucking
that.
Great. But the one that blows my mind is, and I've got a nephew who's 11, and he's really into watching people play video games on YouTube.
Oh yeah, it's massive. Yeah, massive.
Yeah, I'm like, what the fuck are you doing?
Crazy.
But then at the same time, he's 11. For Christmas, I just gave him a copy of Everything Sucks by Descendants, which is my favourite punk record of all time. And he's already watched the Live Edge documentary on YouTube. Do you know what I mean?
Has he ever turned around and gone, well, at least I'm not going staring at people's graves, Uncle Frank?
Yeah.
You fucking weirdo.
Touche. That's me, told. Right, okay.
But it's a funny thing, isn't it? And I think that I can't imagine the feeling of 1,000 cameras distributing.
Yeah.
I find it overwhelming thinking about it.
Yeah, it's a funny thing. I mean, I went to see, you know, when Monty Python did the O2 for a season.
Yeah.
I went to that.
Brilliant.
And what I loved about that is that they came on and just went, and the backdrop went, "Take your pictures now," and it was just like they just did some poses. And, you know, having a hilarious time. And then it was like, right, put your fucking phones away. And I've been considering trying to nick that somehow, and like,
that's a clever idea. I like that, because everyone, it's like both sides win then, I think.
Yeah, totally. It's just like, get your photos out of the way and then put your fucking phones away and enjoy yourself. But like I say, I do hesitate to tell people what to do on that level at a show.
After the gig, though, will you jump on social media and naturally, under the hashtag of the tour or your name, see those videos? And what do you think of them?
I used to get off stage and immediately look on Twitter and see what people were saying, and I'm really trying to stop myself from doing that now, because I just think that it's...
And are you looking for the bad ones
Exactly, because you can scroll through 100 compliments and see one insult and it'll ruin your day. and that's not good for my mental health. Do you know what I mean? It's something I'm trying to stop doing. And not least, you know, it's the reaction in the room. That's what matters. You know, and when Led Zeppelin came off stage, they didn't check Twitter.
Oh,
do you know what I mean?
Lucky fuckers.
I know, right? Yeah. And plus, also, you know, because if somebody's really got something they need to say to me about the show, my email's out there. We post a show picture every day. You know, which is kind of a fun thing, and I do my show counting business, which is my sort of OCD coming to the fore. So yeah, you know, there is that kind of thing, but like, I don't need to come off stage buzzing and then immediately ruin my day by seeing the one person who had a bad time.
Sure.
Do you know what I mean? That's just not a good use of my time.
I was chatting to my friend the other day who's a jockey. He's like a flat race jockey, and their careers are really, really short. Hips go sort of towards their...
Is he tiny?
Tiny.
Yeah.
Absolutely tiny. And he has dinner parties,
so
and they're all tiny.
Oh, really?
It's mental. And dehydrated. They look dehydrated.
Well, they are.
Yeah.
He was like, it's the only sport where at the point where you start, you're in your worst physical shape.
So
they dehydrate themselves down. So sometimes they're walking out to the horse for weight, completely dehydrated, and then go and...
Wow, I've never even thought about that.
Yeah, it's fascinating.
That's very strange.
And they are genuinely all really, really... It makes you feel good about yourself when you have dinner with them. And, but anyway, it's really interesting because they all know that by the time they're 40, they're probably not going to be racing. And so they do something that maybe not many of us do, which is they really think about, well, what next? What am I going to do? And I wondered... you were saying like how much has changed in the last 15 years.
Yeah.
Do you look forward and think, okay, by the time I'm 50, I want...
All the time. There's a whole bunch of stuff to talk about here. One of which is the graph. Let's talk about the graph. This is great. Great audio,
okay,
I know.
Let's
but
do
if
it.
you imagine a graph where your upright axis is success and your x-axis, he said, remembering school, your horizontal axis is time, right? Every band's career who's successful goes up at the beginning, reaches the peak of some kind.
The top of the bell curve.
Yeah, and then it comes down, and then it levels off somewhere. Obviously, there's exceptions to this, like Green Day or whatever, but like generally speaking, it goes up, and then down, and then levels off, right? Mm-hmm. Continuing, somewhere there is a horizontal line on the graph that is called needing to have another job. Mm-hmm. And the question in every musician's mind, whether or not they think about this in terms of a graph or not, is it true that where my settle line is above having another job or below having another job? Do you know what I mean?
Sure.
Like, am I going to land in a place where I can do this for the rest of my life without needing to get another job? And I know this may sound faintly ridiculous given the state of my career, but I'm only just about starting to accept that maybe my settled line is above the having to have another job line.
Wow,
now.
that's
and it's like, I do think I probably can now do this for the rest of my life. Mm-hmm. And I'm very pleased about the idea. Whether or not I will, I will in some shape or form. I like the idea of, I'm not sure I'll do it full time forever. I don't know, maybe. I certainly am at the moment. I've got no plans of stopping. I've got plans through to the end of next year. Do you know what I mean? So, it's that thing about like, I'm just about starting to relax on the idea that maybe I can continue this for a long time.
Yeah.
And with that, if you did play music for your entire life, how would you feel if you get, say, like when you get to your 50s, they say, Frank, this tour, it's not going to be an arena tour.
Yeah.
Could you go back down? Almost like the evolution of the life cycle.
Sure. Well, that I was going to get to that. That's an interesting question as well. The thing is, because like in the level of my success has always been varied around the world, which is an excellent piece of grounding. Do you know what I mean? It's like we're doing arena shows here, but if I'm in the American West, generally we're playing to 500 people a night, maybe 1,000 these days. We're doing them all right. In New Zealand recently we did some 500 caps. Do you know what I mean? And that's quite cool because it means that I'm not just used to one level everywhere we go. And I still love playing. I love playing at any size venue. Having said all of that, like a band I often think about is 100 Reasons, because 100 Reasons went up to Brixton and then back down to the Barfly and kept going. Every fucking band in the world says that they do that when they're on the upslope, and I call bullshit.
Really?
Right? Because that's a really easy thing to say when things are going well. And the fact of the matter is that my ego is invested in my career, and that it couldn't be otherwise. And if I find myself age 60 only able to pull 200 people in London, having done Ali Pali and the O2 and Wembley and all the rest of it, will I be content with that? It's very easy for me to say yes, sitting in this room with you now, and I hope that's true because it feels kind of punk. But but whether or not it is actually true remains to be seen.
Yeah.
Because I think that it would be a very forgivable human reaction to react to that by going, "Fuck this."
Oh, definitely.
You know? And I don't know. I genuinely don't know. We'll find out probably.
Watch this space.
Yeah. So
I think that's a remarkably honest way to look at it.
Definitely,
I think, the thing, I mean, but it's funny because, like, I mean, I know this is the other end of the scale that we're sort of talking about, but like on this tour, we're doing Ali Pali. There was a discussion about doing a couple of nights at Hammersmith instead, which is 5,000 cap, and Ali Pali's 10,000 cap, and it was like, well, if we do 2 nights 5,000, we'll definitely sell both out because there'll be some repeat business and blah 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 blah, and that is kind of what we're doing in Manchester on this tour actually. Although that has quite a lot to do with the arena not really being up and running after the events. We're doing 2 nights at Victoria Warehouse rather than a bigger show.
Sorry, what do you mean by repeat business?
As in, the same person will buy tickets to both nights.
Is that quite common, is it?
Yeah, it is, yeah. So we're doing 2 nights in Manchester, and I would say 5 to 10% of the audience will come to both nights.
Wow, I didn't know.
Yeah, I did not know that.
Yeah,
was a thing.
and which is why we vary the set list between both nights, because I'm aware of that. But
the set list has become a huge problem, hasn't it? Because people,
the amount of time I spend thinking about set lists is really a great sadness to me.
Yeah,
if I could spend that time learning to speak another language.
Set like day 1 of the tour, people will be tweeting, Frank's set list was this in this order. And then people who can't help themselves will jump on and they'll look at that tweet.
People ask, and in front, and I mean, my kind of throwaway one-liner about it is like, "Oh, a gentleman never reveals his set list in advance." But I do also think it's a bit like, just fucking enjoy the show.
Yeah, I know.
Do you know what I mean? Let it be a surprise.
Yeah, I know. It's funny.
I suppose along that line, then. Support acts are really interesting. Jimmy Eat World.
Yeah, which I'm still staggered that they said yes.
It literally makes me giddy.
Yeah,
thinking about
me too. I saw him in the 90s, and like particularly the Lucky Denver Mint EP remains one of my all-time favourite records. And because I know Jim reasonably well, and I have been texting him being like, "Go on, play Lucky Denver Mint. Go on, play." But yeah, I mean, they're a huge established band, and it makes sense from a purely business point of view in terms of ticket sales. It makes sense for them to be out with us as a very special guest. But nevertheless, I'm staggered that they said yes to this.
Are they doing every venue with you? That's amazing.
Well. Yeah, I'm stoked about it. And I get to see them every day.
Yeah, that's cool.
And so when you're choosing a support act, is that something that I saw? Gregory Alan Isaacoff in Dublin just before Christmas. Have you listened to?
I can't say I have actually.
Really cool folk artist, really cool guy. He's
Gregory Alan Isaacoff.
Gregory Alan Isaacoff.
That's a hell of a name.
He's an absolute. He's amazing. He's one of my favourite artists, and he's a horticulturist, and he has a farm in Colorado, so he can't tour all the time. Because but now it makes medicinal marijuana, and that's how they make their money. He's a really, really cool guy, but he had Joe Purdy touring with him, and he was saying that I loved this guy, I listened to him all the time, and I couldn't believe it when he came on tour with me. Is that how you pick how do you...
Yeah, the first thing is I always pick, which is not true of every band, but it is a thing that it's an area of territory I defend extremely militantly.
Oh, that's good.
There have been moments when people from record labels or whoever have had suggestions about support acts who have been met with extremely violent.
You didn't want Little Mix.
Like, fuck off. Do you know what I mean? This is my deal. And part of that, I mean, I've always kind of subscribed to that idea, but the story I always think of is I was on tour with The Offspring in the States in 2009 at a point in time when no one in America knew who I was. And at the last show of the tour, there was an after show party. I was hanging out with Noodles, and I was kind of slightly boilerplate being like, "Oh, how do I ever repay you? Blah, 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 for the opportunity you've given me." And he turned around and he went, "Yeah, I'll tell you how you fucking repay me." He was like, "You pick your fucking supports and you pick bands you believe in and you pay it forward." And he was like, "Don't ever fucking take out a pay on band, because there's a lot of that in this industry. Bands will pay 50 grand to get the support act on a tour rather than getting paid, which they fucking should do because they're working." That happens a lot.
And
that's
the record
crazy.
Label. It's the promoter, the management, the record label. It's the industry generally, and that we never fucking do that. And you know, obviously, Jimmy World work because they're a draw. There are people we will sell more tickets because they're on the tour. It works, I think, a lot about I want a main support band, particularly to be a band who will G the crowd up. Every night there's a battle to get people to move their feet and loosen up. Mm-hmm. And if you've got a support act that's done half that work for you, that means that the first section of my set is much more energetic, which is great for me. You know, it's like there are bands that I love that are really kind of downbeat shoegazery bands, and I'm not sure I need to have them on right before I go on stage.
Yeah. Like, for a different time, yeah.
Yeah. But then it's also, you know, there's an element of like, this doesn't apply to Jimmy well, but it does apply to Grace, who we have first on in this tour, Grace Petrie, who's I hesitate to call her young or new or anything like that. She's been around for a while, but you know, she's on the up. and I want to help her out because I think she's an amazing writer and she's a lovely human as well. And people gave me those slots. You know, I toured with everyone in the early days. In the UK, Biffy Clyro, Levellers took me out. Green Day gave us shows. In the States, we toured with Flogging Molly, Dropkick Murphys, Offspring, blah, 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 Jason Isbell. And that's the thing, you pay it forward. I love being a sport act on some levels. You've got half an hour to 45 minutes to make X thousand people who don't know who you are give a shit. And it's a really tangible challenge. You know, particularly we did a lot of touring with Social D in the States, who famously have a grumpy fan base who aren't fucking interested in sport, man. And every night, it was 2,000 people a night, we'd walk out to 2,000 people just going, what? Whatever, don't care. And then we'd walk off, and I'm going to blow my own trumpet for a minute. We'd walk off every fucking night to a round of applause. And the crowd in the palm of our fucking hands, and it was just like, yes, I did my job.
You worked for it, yeah.
Yeah, you know, and a lot of our fan base in the States still comes from those tours. You know, there's a lot of Social D and Dropkick Murphy shirts at my shows in the States, and that's great. I'm very happy about that. But yeah, so in terms of picking them for myself, I mean, you know, I have a good lord, I have it on my laptop. I have a list as long as your arm of bands that I would like to take out on tour at some point. I tend not to repeat support acts across tours unless it's a very special occasion for that reason. There's just too many people I want to throw shows to. And like I say, I mean, I really, really want to tour with Hot Snakes, for example, who are back together, who are one of my absolute motherfucking all-time favourite fucking bands. And part of the reason for that is I get to see Hot Snakes every day for the length of the tour, and that would make me extremely stoked. Yeah. That hasn't worked yet. If Hot Snakes, if you hear this, come on, come on.
I'm really conscious, Frank, that you've got other interviews to do, so we're gonna wrap this up.
I'm having a lovely time, by the way.
Good. Thanks so much.
Thanks for having me.
Yeah.
What we always like to do at the end of the podcast is some recommendations.
Okay.
And we cover, it can be books, it can be films, it can be
Netflix shows,
or it can be like I tried this in my routine this week, and it's made a real difference to my well-being.
Okay, yeah, I can do a whole bunch of these if you like. I mean, musically, quite often, this is the other thing about sport acts, is it's a way of me having a short answer to a potentially long question. You know, what you listen to lately? It's just like, see who I've been touring with in the last year. That's who I'm excited about. Do you know what I mean?
Cool, yeah.
But Grace
Fair
Patrick's
reflection.
shout. On another level, do you know Hobo Johnson? Bang into Hobo Johnson at the minute. He's like he's a Hispanic guy. He's from Sacramento. He's like a rapper, and he's totally incredible. Hip hop's not my main thing in life, but like I can appreciate somebody who's good with words.
Hobo Johnson.
Yeah, he's got one record
Listen
out.
to that in the car on the way back.
Yeah, he's amazing. He's got this really lazy flow, which makes it sound like he's not rapping until every time at the end of the line you realise the whole thing's been a really clever construct, and it sounded like he was just rambling. And you're like, oh fuck, it rhymes. And it's, you know, do you know what I mean? So that's cool.
And what about a book, and not necessarily just one you've read recently, one that you said would have the biggest impact on the majority of people listening, if you could pick?
I would pick, that's an easy question for me, Clive James, who's my favourite writer, favourite non-fiction writer, I should say. I mean, he's a poet. But he wrote a book called Cultural Amnesia, which is a kind of survey of culture in the 20th century. And it is a staggering work of genius, to quote Dave Eggers. And it really turned my head on almost everything I thought about everything. And I've read it twice, and I'm going to read it again. Read Cultural Amnesia, good lord. And if I may recommend one history book as well, Victor Sebastian's Revolution 1989. The end of the Cold War is kind of, I mean, I am hoping that it's just having that lull. Quite often events are covered as they happen, and then there's a sort of 20-year lull before they become history. You know what I mean? But I do feel that communism in Eastern Europe, which is one of my historical obsessions, and the fall thereof, is a hugely important thing that happened in my lifetime, and that people should spend more time thinking about. And Revolution 1989 made me weep more than once. And it's a fucking history book. But, you know, Václav Havel's my political hero. Do you know what I mean? It's like, these are the people I obsess about. So that's a book. There's an Italian multi-episode series called Gomorrah. Do you know about Gomorrah? Mm. It's about the 'Ndrangheta drug dealers in southern Italy. If you're into stuff like The Wire and shit like that, watch Gomorrah. It will fuck you up.
Okay.
Like, sounds great.
Recommendation.
Yeah, season 3 of Gomorrah had me shouting at my laptop a number of times. It's like, fuck. Also, actually, on that level, Tales from the Tour Bus, the Mike Judge thing. Do you know about that? Mike Judge did Beavis and Butthead. season 1 was all stories about country artists. Season 2 stories about funk artists. It's hilarious. It's amazing. That's great. And then in terms of a recommendation for a lifestyle thing, so I have lower back issues. I slipped 2 discs I jumped off the PA at Bonnaroo Festival onto the stage and landed and went, oh.
Did you brave face it and get on with it?
It's funny. I didn't break it then, but I felt weird. And then over the course of the next 2 weeks, my ability to walk collapsed, and then I had to have an operation, and it was fucked. And I've struggled with it since. Planking.
Is that what you've been doing?
I do 5 minutes.
From the elbows?
From the elbows. Wow. I do 5 straight minutes every day.
5 minutes?
5 minutes.
Without falling?
That's pretty impressive.
That is really impressive.
I didn't start at 5 minutes, to tell you that.
But start with that.
5 minutes planking, and because it's torturous, I tend to put on... I listen to history or economics lectures on YouTube whilst planking.
What a thing to walk into. Can you imagine just opening the door?
I have to say, well, the thing
shaking
is, it's now spread through my whole band and crew. We all do it now.
Really? Group plank.
It is, yeah. It is the absolute solution to back problems, planking, because it's all about core strength. And we were on tour last summer in the States, and Lucero, who are an American country band who we're very good friends with, who for years, they're an amazing band, but they're kind of deep south kind of country punk motherfuckers who don't do things like planking. And Ben Nichols, their singer, he's a lovely guy and a great friend of mine, but he walked into our dressing room one night and there was 8 of us in a circle planking, and he just walked in and was like, motherfucking Englishman, and walked out again. So we he's swilling a whiskey kind of thing, and he was just I don't know what the fuck you're doing, but it's weird and I want no part of it. So yeah,
and the final thing I'd like to say, really, when I was thinking about this interview last night, I've moved house this weekend, right, and we were sat round in boxes, and I was sat there thinking, okay, well, what could we talk to Frank about? And one thing I realised was I have partied with you, listening to you from the age of 16. Okay, I have very nice. Mourned and wept with you. I have been on road trips with you, and I just
planked with you.
I have planked with you.
Well, you're gonna now.
In some weird ways, it doesn't sound too strange. I've also not made mistakes because of some of the things that you've said in your songs. Really? I've learned some things along the way, and I feel a real sense of gratitude and really, thing to say. Really honoured to be able to spend an hour just chewing the flat and to be so humble and honest.
Thanks, man.
That's
a really, really lovely thing to say. That's made my day.
I feel very grateful.
It's a funny thing. I don't listen to my own records. Obviously, because I'm not that.
Yeah, that is not obvious until you think about it. Actually,
I mean, there's just first of all, there's enough other music.
We don't listen to our own shows, do we?
Really? Right? Yeah. Do you know what I mean? And all you would do if you did is find the flaws. Yeah. And so there is a weird level on which you just walk away from a record when it's done, and I don't often think about exactly what you're just talking about, and it's really lovely to hear that those songs exist. It's also a funny thing in terms of a live show because there are bits of songs that evolve over time if you play them every day. And then because we've been doing the 10-year anniversary stuff lately, so we did the 10-year anniversary of Sleepless Week, 10-year anniversary of Love Our Own Song last year. I went back and listened to Love Our Own Song, and the way we play photosynthesis, and it's all nuance that I'm talking about here, but there's bits on the guitar that I do every night, and I was they're not on the record, and I was what the fuck? Surely that's on the record. That's how it goes. Yeah. And it's not there. And I'm talking about tiny little things that most people probably wouldn't notice. But for me, it was staggering.
It's almost like the same as when you look back at a photo from a couple of years ago, and you go, "Wait a minute, I swear my cheeks."
Yeah, or just what was I thinking with my haircut in 2008, or whatever, So it's lovely to hear that they go on, and in a funny way, that is. I'm not sure I want to say the point, because I think that people who spend too much time thinking about legacy are overly self-involved. But it's nice to know that if I stop touring, if I break my fingers and my voice or whatever, that stuff still exists. That's a heartening thought.